Good morning. So today is another fine day here in Gothenburg, and it is raining like, well, it's like the weather is pissed off at me for offending it somehow. But on to more important matters. So today I am going to talk to you a little bit about an insight that I've had into CSS modules and BEM. Now, for those of you who don't know these two things, so BEM stands for Block Element Modifier, and it is a CSS, how do I put it? It's a CSS architecture, or a way to structure your names in your CSS styles so that they scale over time. Or yeah, that's a good description of it. You can check out BEM online. It's something that changed my life completely, at least as a developer. I mean, it's made my CSS much nicer. Actually, if you go and watch it, like just check out BEM online today, like just after this video, you will probably level up your CSS skills like just immediately. And then you have CSS Modules, which is a plugin for PostCSS, which is basically a CSS preprocessor that is very popular these days, especially for those of us who use React and like Webpack. Well, you can do it with Angular as well. It's not necessarily React, but Webpack at the very least. So basically, the thought I've had up until today was that I never really saw the real benefit to having CSS modules. Because what CSS modules will do for you is that it will allow you to write your CSS classes with, you know, whatever name you really want. Like you could call, let's say, a very common problem in CSS is that you will find that you have name collisions. It's not just in CSS, actually. It's a really like naming is the hardest thing in programming, as we graciously like to say. And basically what CSS modules will do is that it will go through all of your CSS, and every time you create these styles, it will add a little unique identifier, a hash, to the end of every name. And why is this powerful? Well, this is powerful because that allows you to have, you can name your CSS classes whatever you want, and at the end of the day there will be no collisions. So now the idea behind BEM is that you name the top level elements. So let's say that you have a section with some content, and you call that, let's say you have a news feed, and you call one of like that section where all the media and like the information from the post is found, and you call that post, and then underneath it you call the image post __ image, and so forth and so forth. And like the idea is very similar to CSS modules. It allows you to namespace all the things that has to do with that post element, and the idea is, once again, very similar. It's going to save you a lot of hassle with namespace collisions. Now, I have argued a long time that I don't see the real benefit to CSS modules, and the reason why I think that's the case is because for all the projects I've ever worked with, BEM has solved that issue very nicely. And I'm a strong advocate of keeping things as simple as possible and keeping my dependencies to the project down. The reason for that is because it very quickly becomes a maintenance issue and support issue when you have a lot of libraries. Like, I love small libraries to do exactly the thing I want them to do, but I also want to be very careful with adding them to my project too quickly, because remember, if there's an issue or like over time things are not supported anymore, you start depending on these libraries, and you very quickly find you're in yourself in a situation basically where you spend more time debugging these things that are supposed to help you than you are like actually fixing, you know, adding value to your project. And even worse is that sometimes you actually find that one library is not compatible with another, and there's all kinds of problems that come with having too many dependencies. So ideally, my rule of thumb, or the way that I think about it, is that you want to only add third-party libraries for the stuff that will take you too much time to build yourself. Don't add it for just arbitrary stuff. And that's what I felt Css Modules was. It's something that is nice to have, but it's absolutely not critical for the project. And for the most part, I've been proven right. I've never been on a project where I felt that, yeah, this is really useful, this is really gonna help me. Until I read an article yesterday from a team, it's a browser plugin called Grammarly, I think. And they posted an article where they described their own workflow. Now, the article was very obviously like geared towards recruiting people, where they basically walk you through their entire tech stack and talk about their findings. And it was actually really interesting because I have built my own browser plugins, and it was so cool to like actually hear how people who do it for a living have done it, because I mean they're leaps and bounds ahead of me, and it's pretty cool to I like listening to people who have done stuff that I haven't done and can teach you some stuff of what their journey has been about, right? And it was when I walked through that article, they had a section where it just spoke to me and made it so crystal clear to me. I couldn't even realize, I didn't even understand, I can't even get how I could miss something so obvious. So they made an argument for CSS modules, and the argument they made was that, you know, when they are adding a browser plugin or an extension to, you know, to somebody's browser, that extension will run on every page that that user is visiting. And what's the problem with that? Well, if you use BEM, odds are that you will not achieve the required, you will very likely find your styles being injected on a page that might actually have a mutation problem. Because like when you use BEM, although it's very easy to just name your CSS in a certain fashion, a lot of people are using BEM and object-oriented CSS and SMACs and so forth. Like, these are not uncommon things to be found on the internet. So odds are that you will actually find a collision coming your way very quickly. And that's when it clicked for me. That's the perfect use case for CSS modules. Because if you have the hash, it's not like when you put your styling on a web page where you actually don't know what's going to be on the page. That's the use case. And I love this because that means that now, even though I don't think that CSS modules is a requirement for your own, if you are making your own little web page, I think it's overkill. But if you are making a browser plugin like that, or a widget, like, you know, jQuery widgets back in the day, where you basically created this thing that people could add to their page, this is actually a really strong use case for it, because you're guaranteed that nobody's gonna mess up your, well, not unintentionally anyway, nobody's gonna mess up your CSS. So I'm a little bit, I'd like to think I'm a little bit enlightened, actually. I think that this makes a lot of sense for this use case. Still saying that I don't think you should just add it arbitrarily, because it does add a lot of like a bit of overhead and like extra stuff that you need to think about, and more complexity to your project. So if you can stick with BEM, stick with BEM. But if you are making something where you don't really know what's going to be on the web page, you're using your new fancy styles or component or extension or so forth, CSS modules is a really good bet.